So, this is an establishment of baseline audio landscape as we participate in this. So, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to have to take this outside. Time to take this outside. Okay. Foot on. There's a reason why I'm doing this. Okay. Cut.
Hello, expert generator. I wish to speak with some who is expert in cognitive load theory. I wish to demonstrate to my colleagues concepts about learning and the environment of learning that might be absent and those detrimental to our peers. I wish for this conversation to abide by CLT and be presented in a way that can be easily engaged with and later integrate into long-term memory, first having to pass through the fastest of integrators, our working memory. Let's have a good time teaching about potentially boring things. As a child, I remember always wanting to watch cartoons. My parents would tell me no, but as a little kid, I didn't understand why. They told me that it was because cartoons weren't educational, that it wasn't good for me to watch. But that's not true. Roadrunner taught me all about the infrastructure of our southwest in the United States, while Coyote taught me a lot about shipping and customer service. And Pepe Le Pew demonstrated hash meta and red flags well before they were a thing. I know the varieties of ways we can teach each other, but how do we know what is best practice and what isn't? The expert generator popped and fizzed and frothed a foam that hardened into a person shape. That person was an expert in cognitive load theory indeed, and is none other than Daniel J. Wegner, Ph.D., Professor Emeritus of Psychology at Harvard University. The expert's generator made him smile like he was looking forward to this conversation. His voice sounded like someone talking with you while playing chess over coffee in their office. It was warm and friendly, like Swiss Miss hot chocolate with Lucky Charms for marshmallows. His face had some wrinkles around the eyes, but also lots of laugh lines from smiling too much, which, honestly, didn't make him look any less smart or competent, but did add to the overall sense of friendliness. It's an honor to meet you. I trust you have been briefed about my inquiry. Wegner. Yes. Il. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to answer my questions. Wegner. Not a problem. Please allow me a moment to review the relevant literature on cognitive load theory. Wegner's bushy eyebrows go flutter in the act of uploading the content into his vast artificial working memory. He looks up at you all pleased as punch. Oh yes, he says in a jovial tone that makes it hard not to love him immediately, which is probably a trick by cognitive load theory. You see a glimpse of a brain-like shape behind Wegner's head, though you can't tell if he has one or if he is simply wearing an elaborate hat. Now where was I? Alright. The literature. Wegner. Well, there are many papers written about this topic, but perhaps the most influential work was published by Professor John Swiller back in 1992, the paper Cognitive Load Theory, Instructional Design for Effective Learning. That's great. You ready to converse about it over this brunch spread? Wegner. I'm eating my Norwegian salmon with hollandaise as we speak. Am I right in describing cognitive load theory as trying to get humans to remember information, having it embed in their long-term memory, but in order for that to happen, it has to go through our fussy working memory? What makes working memory so fussy? Wegner. Well, as I said before, cognitive load theory suggests that people have limited working memories that only hold a certain amount of content at the time. So when someone tries to learn something, they first need to decide what exactly the thing is going to be, which involves deciding how much of each concept is needed and then storing the conceptual knowledge into short-term storage while moving on to the next task at hand. If the person is presented with too many new things all at once, they may not know where to start or can't retain the information properly because there isn't enough space in the brain's limited capacity. This reminds me of the episode of The Big Bang Theory when Sheldon is learning Russian. He doesn't understand the language very well, so whenever his friend Alexis comes over, she says good day in Russian. He always gets confused. How would cognitive load theory explain this phenomenon? Wigner. Well, you see, Sheldon has trouble keeping everything straight in his head because it's just way too hard for him to keep track of every little detail about what was said and done. So when he hears good day, he remembers that it means something along the lines of hello, but also maybe good luck, so it becomes confusing for him and he forgets what it actually meant. It's a similar idea to having to remember all these different elements of your to-do list. You mentioned a fussy working memory earlier. I've heard that some people have more of one than others. Can that be attributed to their genetic makeup? Does CLT say anything on that subject? Wigner. Cognitive load theory does suggest that differences between individuals exist, yes. However, no conclusive evidence on how those differences are caused yet exists, but we're working on it. Wigner. Well, while it's unlikely that Sheldon will ever master Russian, he'll never get over his inability to remember every little detail, which is probably what makes learning such an issue. There are still things he can do. First off, he could start by going through flashcards and trying to memorize words or phrases from his target language. He then needs to practice speaking Russian in front of a mirror so he doesn't forget what he's saying and repeat the process several times until he's confident with the pronunciation of new vocabulary. That should make the task of understanding simple conversations easier once he has mastered basic speech. Interesting. So I would just have to speak my languages more often in order to retain them better. Wait, no, not exactly. You wouldn't have to only speak your second language, but rather use both of them interchangeably as much as possible. I see. Like when I'm translating text messages from English to French. Wigner. Precisely. And while Sheldon isn't likely to ever become fluent in Russian, there are other ways to improve his...
We're starting to repeat. Oh, crap. Because we're not on... No, we're on Crick.
Conversational skills. For instance, if he was practicing writing out all of his thoughts for each sentence, this may help him recognize common grammar structures like prepositions and tenses. You might even want to suggest that Sheldon keep a diary or journal where he records his daily experiences and feelings and keeps track of any changes that occur in his life over time. This could help him be aware of patterns and also record memories he can share with others later on. It might take a while, but he will probably find it helpful to try and connect these personal journals with his studies so they reinforce one another. Yes, well, we're talking about a fictional character here, so perhaps the advice is unnecessary. But what else should someone do who wants to learn something new but feels overwhelmed by how much new information there is? The process. Wegner. Well, again, cognitive load theory suggests that people tend to remember things best when they are taught or learn through context rather than just rote memorization, meaning the more you tie your learning into your own day-to-day life, the better off you are. This means taking notes when you read books if that's your preferred method, as opposed to reading without actually retaining any of the material. This would be akin to simply listening to a lecture from a professor at university instead of really trying to understand it. It might work for some students, but for others it will be very frustrating. I think that if you have a difficult time understanding a certain topic, then you should try and research other topics that relate to it in order to gain an in-depth knowledge of the subject matter. And increase your working memory capacity. That way you'll be able to focus on a single task and absorb all of its details. Oh yes, tying it into our real lives does make sense. Wigner, absolutely, and sometimes even studying may not be enough. You should also seek out opportunities where you can practice using new language skills in various social situations. You don't necessarily need to attend formal lessons or join a club. Just use any opportunity that arises naturally. You said before the cognitive load theory says there is a limit to how much information we can take in at one time. How is this limited determined? What determines this upper bound? Is it related to our individual mental limits or the complexity or difficulty level of the learning material itself? Widner, that's right, I did say that already. The amount of content that someone can process at any given time depends on both their short-term and long-term storage capacities. In other words, people have a finite number of slots available for holding stuff inside of them at once, and they'll fill those spots based on the needs of whatever task they are engaged with at the moment. When faced with something too difficult, like remembering an entire conversation from Russian to French while speaking your second language simultaneously, your working memory will fill up and prevent you from being able to memorize as many new concepts as you would otherwise be able to do if you were focusing solely on one thing. It might sound easy, but try it out for yourself next time you're studying. You'll notice that you get less done when you struggle to keep all the information straight in your head. Interesting. So there is no such thing as learning styles then. Rather, each individual has certain cognitive abilities, e.g., short-term or long-term memory, that determine his or her capacity for learning in different ways. Wigner, absolutely. You can think of these skills as more of a spectrum instead of categories. Some people may have better short-term or long-term memories than others, but they won't necessarily perform best at every type of learning. For example, people who excel at retaining large amounts of knowledge are not always good at recalling exact facts about things they've learned a long time ago. Similarly, those with poor working memory aren't very efficient at tasks involving creativity or complex decision-making. Some people might have great recall of their high school days but fail to understand how to solve problems they encounter daily at work. Conversely, those with superior working memory might be excellent at remembering what was said during a lecture but don't know the first thing about cooking dinner after class. Wagner goes on to suggest that we should view the entire process of learning as a skill that can be improved by our understanding and working to improve our individual cognitive abilities. This is why CLT is such an important theory in education, because it's focused around helping students learn in ways that will help them succeed in life. Well, that's all well and good, but I'm still left wondering if there's any way that someone can increase his...
Or her. Or there.
or her cognitive abilities. Wagner. Yes, You can try out these new methods in order to see whether you're better suited for one method over another. That is, which style suits your needs better. And also, you can start experimenting with other strategies like those mentioned earlier to see what works best for you. Great advice, Dr. Wegner. Thank you very much. I was looking into the different types of personalities, she said when he hung up the phone, like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the Enneagram. Sheldon leaned back and stared at the ceiling. His head ached from thinking too hard. It had been so long since Sheldon thought about anything else besides his own problems.
Alright, we're done with that.